This is called illusion. When the living being is hungry for spiritual satisfaction, he is misrepresented by material hunger. But the foolish leaders cannot see that even the people who are most sumptuously materially satisfied are still hungry. And what is their hunger and poverty? This hunger is actually for spiritual food, spiritual shelter, spiritual defense, and spiritual sense gratification. These can be obtained in the association of the Supreme Spirit, Lord Sri Krishna, and therefore one who has them cannot be attracted by the so-called food, shelter, defense, and sense gratification of the material world, even if they are relished by the denizens of the heavenly planets. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 8:16, it is said by the Lord that even in the topmost planet of the universe, namely the Brahmaloka, where the duration of life is multiplied by millions of years by earth calculation, one cannot satisfy his hunger. Such hunger can be satisfied only when the living being is situated in immortality, which is attained in the spiritual sky, far, far above the Brahmaloka, in the association of Lord Mukunda, the Lord who awards his devotees the transcendental pleasure of liberation. Text 7. O son of Burgu, Sanaka, when the child Parikshit, the great fighter, was in the womb of his mother Uttara, and was suffering from the burning heat of the Brahmastra thrown by Aspatama, he could observe the Supreme Lord coming to him. Purport. Death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. A living being, according to his own action, is allowed to enter into the womb of a mother by the vehicle of a father's semen, and thus he develops his desired body. This is the law of birth in specific bodies, according to one's past actions. When he is awake from trance, he feels the inconvenience of being confined within the womb, and thus he wants to come out of it, and sometimes fortunately prays to the Lord for such liberation. Maharaja Parikshit, while in the womb of his mother, was struck by the Brahmastra released by Aspatama, and he was feeling the burning heat. But because he was a devotee of the Lord at once appeared himself within the womb by his all-powerful energy, and the child could see that someone else had come to save him. Even in that helpless condition, the child Parikshit endured the unbearable temperature due to his being a great fighter by nature, and for this reason the word Vira has been used. Text 8. He, the Lord, was only thumb-high, but he was all transcendental. He had a very beautiful, blackish, infallible body, and he wore a dress of lightning yellow and a helmet of blazing gold. Thus he was seen by the child. Text 9. The Lord was encircled with 4 hands, earrings of molten gold, and his eyes blood-red with fury. As he loitered about, his club constantly encircled him like a shooting star. Purport. It is said in the Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, that the Supreme Lord Govinda, by his one plenary portion, enters into the halo of the universe and distributes himself as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, not only within the heart of every living being, but also within every atom of the material elements. Thus the Lord is all-pervading by his inconceivable potency, and thus he entered the womb of Uttara to save his beloved devotee Maharaja Parikshit. In the Bhagavad Gita 9:31, the Lord assured everyone that his devotees are never to be vanquished. No one can kill a devotee of the Lord because he is protected by the Lord, and no one can save a person whom the Lord desires to kill. The Lord is all-powerful, and therefore he can both save and kill as he likes. He became visible to his devotee Maharaja Parikshit, even in that awkward position, in the womb of his mother, in a shape just suitable for his vision. The Lord can become bigger than thousands of universes and can become smaller than an atom at the same time. Merciful as he is, he becomes just suitable to the vision of the limited living being. He is unlimited. He is not limited by any measurement of our calculation. He can become bigger than what we can think of, and he can become smaller than what we can conceive. But in all circumstances he is the same all-powerful Lord. There is no difference between the thumb-like Vishnu in the womb of Uttara and the full-fledged Narayana in the Vaikuntha Dhamma, the kingdom of Godhead. He accepts the form of Archavigraha, worshipable deity, just to accept service from his different incapable devotees. By the mercy of the Archavigraha, the form of the Lord in material elements, the devotees who are in the material world can easily approach the Lord, although he is not conceivable by the material senses. The Archavigraha is therefore an all-spiritual form of the Lord, to be perceived by the material devotees. Such an Archavigraha of the Lord is never to be considered material. There is no difference between matter and spirit for the Lord, although there is a gulf of difference between the two in the case of the conditioned living being. For the Lord there is nothing but spiritual existence, and similarly there is nothing except spiritual existence for the pure devotee of the Lord in his intimate relation with the Lord. Text 10. The Lord was thus engaged in vanquishing the radiation of the Brahmastra, just as the sun evaporates a drop of dew. He was observed by the child, who thought about who he was. Text 11. While thus being observed by the child, the Supreme Lord Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul of everyone, and the Protector of the righteous, who stretches in all directions, and who is unlimited by time and space, disappeared at once. Purport. Child Parikshit was not observing a living being who is limited by time and space. There is a gulf of difference between the Lord and the individual living being. The Lord is mentioned herein as the supreme living being, unlimited by time and space. Every living being is limited by time and space. Even though a living being is qualitatively one with the Lord, quantitatively there is a great difference between the Supreme Soul and the common individual soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, both the living beings and the Supreme Being are said to be all-pervading, yena sharvam idam tatam. Yet there is a difference between these two kinds of all-pervasiveness. A common living being or soul can be all-pervading within his own limited body, but the Supreme Living Being is all-pervading in all space and all time. A common living being cannot extend its influence over another common living being by its all-pervasiveness, but the Supreme Supersoul, the Personality of Godhead, is unlimitedly able to exert his influence over all places and all times, and over all living beings. And because he is all-pervasive, unlimited by time and space, he can appear even within the womb of the mother of child Parikshit. He is mentioned herein as the protector of the righteous. Anyone who is a surrendered soul unto the Supreme is righteous, and he is specifically protected by the Lord in all circumstances. The Lord is the indirect protector of the unrighteous also, for he rectifies their sins through his external potency. The Lord is mentioned herein as one who is dressed in the 10 directions. This means dressed with garments on 10 sides, up and down. He is present everywhere, and can appear and disappear at his will from everywhere and anywhere. His disappearance from the sight of the child Parikshit does not mean that he appeared on the spot from any other place. He was present there, and even after his disappearance he was there, although invisible to the eyes of the child. This material covering of the effulgent firmament is also something like a womb of the Mother Nature, and we are all put into the womb by the Lord, the Father of all living beings. He is present everywhere, even in this material womb of Mother Durga, and those who are deserving can see the Lord. Text 12. Thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu, who would be exactly like him in prowess, took birth. Purport. Astronomical calculations of stellar influences upon a living being are not suppositions, but are factual, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Every living being is controlled by the laws of nature at every minute, just as a citizen is controlled by the influence of the state. The state laws are grossly observed, but the laws of material nature, being subtle to our gross understanding, cannot be experienced grossly. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 3:9, every action of life produces another reaction, which is binding upon us, and only those who are acting on behalf of Yajna, Vishnu, are not bound by reactions. Our actions are judged by the higher authorities, the agents of the Lord, and thus we are awarded bodies according to our activities. The law of nature is so subtle that every part of our body is influenced by the respective stars, and a living being obtains his working body to fulfill his terms of imprisonment by the manipulation of such astronomical influence. A man's destiny is therefore ascertained by the birth-time constellation of stars, and a factual horoscope is made by a learned astrologer. It is a great science, and misuse of a science does not make it useless. Maharaja Parikshit, or even the personality of Godhead, appear in certain constellations of good stars, and thus the influence is exerted upon the body, thus born at an auspicious moment. The most auspicious constellation of stars takes place during the appearance of the Lord in this material world, and it is specifically called Jayanti, a word not to be abused for any other purposes. Maharaja Parikshit was not only a great Kshatriya emperor, but also a great devotee of the Lord. Thus he cannot take his birth at any inauspicious moment. As a proper place and time is selected to receive a respectable personage, so also to receive such a personality as Maharaja Parikshit, who is especially cared for by the Supreme Lord, a suitable moment is chosen when all good stars assembled together to exert their influence upon the king. Thus he took his birth just to be known as the great hero of Srimad Bhagavatam. This suitable arrangement of astral influences is never a creation of man's will, but is the arrangement of the superior management of the agency of the Supreme Lord. Of course, the arrangement is made according to the good or bad deeds of the living being. Herein lies the importance of pious acts performed by the living being. Only by pious acts can one be allowed to get good wealth, good education, and beautiful features. The samskaras of the school of Sanatana Dharma, man's eternal engagement, are highly suitable for creating an atmosphere for taking advantage of good stellar influences, and therefore Garbhadana Samskara, or the first seedling purificatory process prescribed for the higher castes, is the beginning of all pious acts to receive a good, pious, and intelligent class of men in human society. There will be peace and prosperity in the world due to good and sane population only. There is hell and disturbance only because of the unwanted, insane populace addicted to sex indulgence. Text 13. King Yudhishthira, who was very satisfied with the birth of Maharaja Parikshit, had the purificatory process of birth performed. Learned Brahmanas, headed by Damya and Kripa, recited auspicious hymns. Purport: there is a need for a good and intelligent class of Brahmanas who are expert in performing the purificatory processes prescribed in the system of Varnashrama Dharma. Unless such purificatory processes are performed, there is no possibility of good population, and in the age of Kali, the population all over the world is of Sudra quality or lower for want of this purificatory process. It is not possible, however, to revive the Vedic process of purification in this age, for want of proper facilities and good Brahmanas, but there is the Pancharatrika system also recommended for this age. The Pancharatrika system acts on the Sudra class of men, supposedly the population of the Kali Yuga, and it is the prescribed purificatory process suitable to the age and time. Such a purificatory process is allowed only for spiritual upliftment and not for any other purpose. Spiritual upliftment is never conditioned by higher or lower parentage. After the Garbhadana purificatory process, there are certain other samskaras like Simantanayana, Sada Bhakshanam, etc., during the period of pregnancy, and when the child is born, the first purificatory process is Jatakarma. This was performed duly by Maharaja Yudhishthira with the help of good and learned Brahmanas, like Damya, the royal priest, and Karpacharya, who was not only a priest but also a great general. Both these learned and perfect priests, assisted by other good Brahmanas, were employed by Maharaja Yudhishthira to perform the ceremony. Therefore, all the samskaras, purificatory processes, are not mere formalities or social functions only, but they are all for practical purposes and can be successfully performed by expert Brahmanas like Damya and Karpa. Such Brahmanas are not only rare, but also not available in this age, and therefore, for the purpose of spiritual upliftment in this fallen age, the Goswamis prefer the purificatory processes under the Pancharatrika formulas to the Vedic rites. Karpacharya is the son of the great Rishi Sardban, who was born in the family of Gautama. The birth is said to be accidental. By chance, the great Rishi Sardban met Janapadi, a famous society girl of heaven, and the Rishi Sardban discharged semen in two parts. By one part immediately a male child, and by the other part a female child were born as twins. The male child was later on known as Karpa, and the female child was known as Karpi. Maharaja Santanu, while engaged in chase in the jungle, picked up the children and brought them up to the Brahminical status by the proper purificatory process. Kirpacharya later became a great general like Dronacharya, and his sister was married to Dronacharya. Kirpacharya later on took part in the battle of Kurukshetra and joined the party of Duryodhana. Kirpacharya helped kill Abhimanyu, the father of Maharaja Parikshit, but he was still held in esteem by the family of the Pandavas, due to his being as great a Brahmana as Dronacharya. When the Pandavas were sent to the forest after being defeated in the gambling game with Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra entrusted the Pandavas to Kirpacharya for guidance. After the end of the battle, Kirpacharya again became a member of the royal assembly, and he was called during the birth of Maharaja Parikshit for recitation of auspicious Vedic hymns to make the ceremony successful. Maharaja Yudhishthira, while quitting the palace for his great departure to the Himalayas, entrusted Karpacharya with Maharaja Parikshit as his disciple, and he left home satisfied because of Karpacharya's taking charge of Maharaja Parikshit. The great administrators, kings, and emperors were always under the guidance of learned Brahmanas like Kirpacharya, and thus were able to act properly in the discharge of political responsibilities. Text 14. Upon the birth of a son, the king, who knew how, where, and when charity should be given, gave gold, land, villages, elephants, horses, and good food grains to the Brahmanas. Purport. Only the Brahmanas and Sannyasis are authorized to accept charity from the householders. In all the different occasions of samskaras, especially during the time of birth, marriage, and death, wealth is distributed to the Brahmanas because the Brahmanas give the highest quality of service in regard to the prime necessity of humankind. The charity was substantial in the shape of gold, land, villages, horses, elephants, and food grains, with other materials for cooking complete foodstuff. The Brahmanas were not therefore poor in the actual sense of the term. On the contrary, because they possessed gold, land, villages, horses, elephants, and sufficient grains, they had nothing to earn for themselves. They would simply devote themselves to the well-being of the entire society. The word tirthavit is significant because the king knew well where and when charity has to be given. Charity is never unproductive or blind. In the Shastras, charity was offered to persons who deserved to accept charity by dint of spiritual enlightenment. The so-called Daridra Narayana, a misconception of the Supreme Lord by unauthorized persons, is never to be found in the Shastras as the object of charity, nor can a wretched poor man receive much munificent charity in the way of horses, elephants, land, and villages. The conclusion is that the intelligent men, or the Brahmanas, specifically engaged in the service of the Lord, were properly maintained without anxiety for the needs of the body, and the king and other householders gladly looked after all their comforts. It is enjoined in the Shastras that as long as a child is joined with the mother by the navel pipe, the child is considered to be of one body with the mother, but as soon as the pipe is cut and the child is separated from the mother, the purificatory process of jatakarma is performed. The administrative demigods and past forefathers of the family come to see a newly born child, and such an occasion is specifically accepted as the proper time for distributing wealth to the right persons, productively for the spiritual advancement of society. Text 15. The learned Brahmanas, who were very satisfied with the charities of the king, addressed him as the chief amongst the Purus, and that his son was certainly in the line of descent from the Purus. Text 16. The Brahmanas said, "This spotless son has been restored by the all-powerful and all-pervasive Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, in order to oblige you. He was saved when he was doomed to be destroyed by an irresistible supernatural weapon." Purport: the child Parikshit was saved by the all-powerful and all-pervasive Vishnu, Lord Krishna, for two reasons. The first reason is that the child in the womb of his mother was spotless, due to his being a pure devotee of the Lord. The second reason is that the child was the only surviving male descendant of Puru, the pious forefather of the virtuous King Yudhishthira. The Lord wants to continue the line of pious kings to rule over the earth as his representatives for the actual progress of a peaceful and prosperous life. After the battle of Kurukshetra, even up to the next generation of Maharaja Yudhishthira was annihilated, and there were none who could generate another son in the great royal family. Maharaja Parikshit, the son of Abhimanyu, was the only surviving heir apparent in the family, and by the irresistible supernatural Brahmastra weapon of Ashvamata, he was forced to be annihilated. Lord Krishna is described herein as Vishnu, and this is also significant. Lord Krishna, the original personality of Godhead, does the work of protection and annihilation in his capacity of Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is the plenary expansion of Lord Krishna. The all-pervasive activities of the Lord are executed by him in his Vishnu feature. Child Parikshit is described here as spotlessly white because he is an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. Such unalloyed devotees of the Lord appear on the earth just to execute the mission of the Lord. The Lord desires the conditioned souls hovering in the material creation to be reclaimed to go back home, back to Godhead, and thus he helps them by preparing the transcendental literatures, like the Vedas, by sending missionaries of saints and sages, and by deputing his representative, the spiritual master. Such transcendental literatures, missionaries, and representatives of the Lord are spotlessly white because the contamination of the material qualities cannot even touch them. They are always protected by the Lord when they are threatened with annihilation. Such foolish threats are made by the gross materialists. The Brahmastra, which was thrown by Ashvamata at the child Parikshit, was certainly supernaturally powerful, and nothing of the material world could resist its force of penetration. But the all-powerful Lord, who is present everywhere, within and without, could counteract it by his all-powerful potency, just to save a bona fide servant of the Lord and descendant of another devotee, Maharaja Yudhishthira, who was always obliged by the Lord by his causeless mercy. Text 17. For this reason, this child will be well known in the world as one who is protected by the personality of Godhead. O most fortunate one, there is no doubt that this child will become a first-class devotee, and will be qualified with all good qualities. Purport: the Lord gives protection to all living beings because he is their supreme leader. The Vedic hymns confirm that the Lord is the supreme person amongst all personalities. The difference between the two living beings is that the one, the personality of Godhead, provides for all other living beings, and by knowing and by knowing him one can achieve eternal peace, Katha Upanishad. Such protection is given by his different potencies to different grades of living beings, but as far as his unalloyed devotees are concerned, he gives the protection personally. Therefore, Maharaja Parikshit is protected from the very beginning of his appearance in the womb of his mother, and because he is especially given protection by the Lord, the indication must be concluded that the child would be a first-grade devotee of the Lord with all good qualities. There are three grades of devotees, namely the Mahabhagavata, the Madhyama Adhikari, and the Kanista Adhikari. Those who go to the temples of the Lord and offer worshipful respect to the deity without sufficient knowledge in the theological science, and therefore without any respect for the devotees of the Lord, are called materialistic devotees, or Kanista Adhikari, the third-grade devotees. Secondly, the devotees who have developed a mentality of genuine service to the Lord, and who thus make friendships only with similar devotees, show favor to the neophytes, and avoid the atheists, are called the second-grade devotees. But those who see everything in the Lord, or everything of the Lord, and also see in everything an eternal relation of the Lord, so that there is nothing within their purview of sight except the Lord, are called the Mahabhagavatas, or the first-grade devotees of the Lord. Such first-grade devotees of the Lord are perfect in all respects. A devotee who may be in any of these categories is automatically qualified by all good qualities, and thus a Mahabhagavata devotee, like Maharaja Parikshit, is certainly perfect in all respects. And because Maharaja Parikshit took his birth in the family of Maharaja Yudhishthira, he is addressed herein as the Mahabhagavata, or the greatest of the fortunates. The family in which a Mahabhagavata takes his birth is fortunate because, due to the birth of a first-grade devotee, the members of the family, past, present, and future, up to 100 generations, become liberated by the grace of the Lord, out of respect for his beloved devotee. Therefore, the highest benefit is done to one's family simply by becoming an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. Text 18. The good King Yudhishthira inquired, O great souls, will he become as saintly a king, as pious in his very name, and as famous and glorified in his achievements as others who appeared in this great royal family? Purport. The forefathers of King Yudhishthira were all great saintly kings, pious and glorified by their great achievements. They were all saints on the royal throne, and therefore all the members of the state were happy, pious, well-behaved, prosperous, and spiritually enlightened. Under strict guidance of the great souls and spiritual injunctions, such great saintly kings were trained up, and as a result the kingdom was full of saintly persons, and was a happy land of spiritual life. Maharaja Yudhishthira was himself a replica of his ancestors, and he desired that the next king after him become exactly like his great forefathers. He was happy to learn from the learned Brahmanas that by astrological calculations the child would be born a first-grade devotee of the Lord. And more confidently he wanted to know whether the child was going to follow in the footsteps of his great forefathers. That is the way of the monarchical state. The reigning king should be a pious, chivalrous devotee of the Lord, and fear personified for the upstarts. He must also leave an heir apparent equally qualified to rule over the innocent citizens. In the modern setup of the democratic states, the people themselves are fallen to the qualities of the Sudras or less, and the government is run by their representative, who is ignorant of the scriptural mode of administrative education. Thus the whole atmosphere is surcharged with Sudra qualities, manifested by lust and avarice. Such administrators quarrel every day among themselves. The cabinet of ministers changes often due to party and group selfishness. Everyone wants to exploit the state resources till he dies. No one retires from political life, unless forced to do so. How can such low-grade men do good to the people? The result is corruption, intrigue, and hypocrisy. They should learn from the Srimad Bhagavatam how ideal the administrators must be before they can be given charge of different posts. Text 19. The learned Brahmanas said, O son of Pirtha, this child shall be exactly like King Ikshvaku, son of Manu, in maintaining all those who are born, and as for following the Brahminical principles, especially in being true to his promise, he shall be exactly like Rama, the personality of Godhead, the son of Maharaja Dasharatha. Purport. Praja means the living being who has taken his birth in the material world. Actually, the living being has no birth and no death, but because of his separation from the service of the Lord, and due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is offered a suitable body to satisfy his material desires. In doing so, one becomes conditioned by the laws of material nature, and the material body is changed in terms of his own work. The living entity thus transmigrates from one body to another in 8,400,000 species of life. But due to his being the part and parcel of the Lord, he not only is maintained with all necessities of life by the Lord, but also is protected by the Lord and his representatives, the saintly kings. These saintly kings give protection to all the prajas, or living beings, to live and to fulfill their terms of imprisonment. Maharaja Parikshit was actually an ideal saintly king, because while touring his kingdom he happened to see that a poor cow was about to be killed by the personified Kali, whom he at once took to task as a murderer. This means that even the animals were given protection by the saintly administrators, not from any sentimental point of view, but because those who have taken their birth in the material world have the right to live. All the saintly kings, beginning from the king of the sun globe down to the king of the earth, are so inclined by the influence of the Vedic literatures. The Vedic literatures are taught in higher planets also, as there is reference in the Bhagavad Gita 4.1 about the teachings to the sun god, Vivasvan, by the Lord, and such lessons are transferred by disciplic succession, as it was done by the sun god to his son Manu, and from Manu to Maharaja Ishvaku. There are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma, and the Manu referred to herein is the seventh Manu, who is one of the Prajapatis, those who create progeny, and he is the son of the sun god. He is known as the Vaivasvata Manu. He had 10 sons, and Maharaja Ishvaku is one of them. Maharaja Ishvaku also learned Bhakti Yoga as taught in the Bhagavad Gita from his father Manu, who got it from his father, the sun god. Later on, the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita came down by disciplic succession from Maharaja Ishvaku, but in course of time the chain was broken by unscrupulous persons, and therefore it again had to be taught to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So all the Vedic literatures are current from the very beginning of creation of the material world, and thus the Vedic literatures are known as aparosheya, not made by man. The Vedic knowledge was spoken by the Lord and first heard by Brahma, the first created living being within the universe. Maharaja Ishvaku, one of the sons of Vaivasvata Manu, he had 100 sons. He prohibited meat eating. His son Sasada became the next king after his death. Manu. The Manu mentioned in this verse as the father of Ishvaku is the seventh Manu, of the name Vaivasvata Manu, the son of sun god Vaivasvan, to whom Lord Krishna instructed the teachings of Bhagavad Gita prior to his teaching them to Arjuna. Mankind is the descendant of Manu. This Vaivasvata Manu has 10 sons, named Ishvaku, Nabaga, Dursta, Saryati, Narastyanta, Nabaga, Dista, Karusha, Prasadra, and Vashaman. The Lord's incarnation Matsya, the gigantic fish, was advented during the beginning of Vaivasvata Manu's reign. He learned the principles of Bhagavad Gita from his father Vaivasvan, the sun god, and he re-instructed the same to his son Maharaja Ishvaku. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga, the sun god instructed devotional service to Manu, and Manu in his turn instructed it to Ishvaku for the welfare of the whole human society. Lord Rama. The Supreme Personality of Godhead incarnated himself as Sri Rama, accepting the sonhood of his pure devotee Maharaja Dasharatha, the king of Ayodhya. Lord Rama descended along with his plenary portions, and all of them appeared as his younger brothers in the month of Chaitra on the 9th day of the growing moon in the Treta Yuga. The Lord appeared as usual to establish the principles of religion and to annihilate the disturbing elements. When he was just a young boy, he helped the great sage Visvamitra by killing Subahu and striking Maricha, the she-demon, who was disturbing the sages in their daily discharge of duties. The Brahmanas and Kshatriyas are meant to cooperate for the welfare of the mass of people. The Brahmana sages endeavor to enlighten the people by perfect knowledge, and the Kshatriyas are meant for their protection. Lord Ramachandra is the ideal king for maintaining and protecting the highest culture of humanity, known as Brahmanya Dharma. The Lord is specifically the protector of the cows and the Brahmanas, and hence he enhances the prosperity of the world. He rewarded the administrative demigods by effective weapons to conquer the demons through the agency of Vishvamitra. He was present in the bow sacrifice in King Janaka, and by breaking the invincible bow of Shiva, he married Sita Devi, daughter of Maharaja Janaka. After his marriage, he accepted exile in the forest for 14 years by the order of his father, Maharaja Dasharatha. To help the administration of the demigods, he killed 14,000 demons, and by the intrigues of the demons, his wife Sita Devi was kidnapped by Ravana. He made friendship with Sugriva, who was helped by the Lord to kill Vali, brother of Sugriva. By the help of Lord Rama, Sugriva became the king of the Vanaras, a race of gorillas. The Lord built a floating bridge of stones on the Indian Ocean and reached Lanka, the kingdom of Ravana, who had kidnapped Sita. Later on, Ravana was killed by him, and Ravana's brother, Vibhishana, was instilled on the throne of Lanka. Vibhishana was one of the brothers of Ravana, a demon, but Lord Rama made him immortal by his blessings. On the expiry of 14 years, after settling the affairs at Lanka, the Lord came back to his kingdom, Ayodhya, by Flower Plain. He instructed his brother Shatrughna to attack Lavanashara, who reigned at Mathura, and the demon was killed. He performed 10 Ashvamedha sacrifices, and later on he disappeared while taking a bath in the Sarayu River. The great epic Ramayana is the history of Lord Rama's activities in the world, and the authoritative Ramayana was written by the great poet Valmiki. Text 20. This child will be a munificent donor of charity and protector of the surrendered, like the famous King Sibi of the Usanara country, and he will expand the name and fame of his family, like Bharata, the son of Maharaja Dushyanta. Purport. A king becomes famous by his acts of charity, performances of yajnas, protection of the surrendered, etc. A Kshatriya king is proud to give protection to the surrendered souls. This attitude of a king is called Ishvarabhava, or factual power to give protection in a righteous cause. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructs living beings to surrender unto him, and he promises all protection. The Lord is all-powerful and true to his word, and therefore he never fails to give protection to his different devotees. The king, being the representative of the Lord, must possess this attitude of giving protection to the surrendered souls at all risk. Maharaja Sibi, the king of Usinara, was an intimate friend of Maharaja Yayati, who was able to reach the heavenly planets along with Maharaja Sibi. Maharaja Sibi was aware of the heavenly planet where he was to be transferred after his death, and the description of this heavenly planet is given in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva 96, 6-9. Maharaja Sibi was so charitably disposed that he wanted to give over his acquired position in the heavenly kingdom to Yayati, but he did not accept it. Yayati went to the heavenly planet along with great rishis like Astaka and others. On inquiry from the rishis, Yayati gave an account of Sibi's pious acts when all of them were on the path to heaven. He has become a member of the assembly of Yamaraja, who has become his worshipful deity. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, the worshipper of the demigods goes to the planets of the demigods, Yanti Devavrata Devan. So Maharaja Sibi has become an associate of the great Vaishnava authority Yamaraja on that particular planet. While he was on the earth, he became very famous as a protector of surrendered souls and a donor of charities. The king of heaven once took the shape of a pigeon hunter bird, eagle, and Agni, the fire god, took the shape of a pigeon. The pigeon, while being chased by the eagle, took shelter on the lap of Maharaja Sibi, and the hunter eagle wanted the pigeon back from the king. The king wanted to give it some other meat to eat, and requested the bird not to kill the pigeon. The hunter bird refused to accept the king's offer, but it was settled later on that the eagle would accept flesh from the body of the king, of the pigeon's equivalent weight. The king began to cut flesh from his body to weigh in the balance equivalent to the weight of the pigeon, but the mystic pigeon always remained heavier. The king then put himself on the balance to equate with the pigeon, and the demigods were pleased with him. The king of heaven and the fire god disclosed their identity, and the king was blessed by them. Devarsi Narada also glorified Maharaja Sibi for his great achievements, specifically in charity and protection. Maharaja Sibi sacrificed his own son for the satisfaction of human beings in his kingdom, and thus child Parikshit was to become a second Sibi in charity and protection. Dashyanti Bharata. There are many Bharatas in history, of which Bharata, the brother of Lord Rama, Bharata, the son of King Rishabha, and Bharata, the son of Maharaja Dushyanta, are very famous, and all these Bharatas are historically known to the universe. This earth planet is known as Bharata or Bharatavarsha due to King Bharata, the son of Rishabha, but according to some, this land is known as Bharata due to the reign of the son of Dushyanta. So far as we are convinced, this land's name Bharatavarsha was established from the reign of Bharata, the son of King Rishabha. Before him, the land was known as Ilavritavarsa, but just after the coronation of Bharata, the son of Rishabha, this land became famous as Bharatavarsa. But despite all this, Bharata, the son of Maharaja Dushyanta, was not less important. He is the son of the famous beauty Sakuntala. Maharaja Dushyanta fell in love with Shakuntala in the forest, and Bharata was conceived. After that, Maharaja forgot his wife Shakuntala by the curse of Kanvamuni, and the child Bharata was brought up in the forest by his mother. Even in his childhood, he was so powerful that he challenged the lions and elephants in the forest, and would fight with them as little children play with cats and dogs. Because of the boys becoming so strong, more than the so-called modern Tarzan, the rishis in the forest called him Chavadamana, or one who is able to control everyone. A full description of Maharaja Bharata is given in the Mahabharata Adi Parva. The Pandavas or the Kurus are sometimes addressed as Bharata due to being born in the dynasty of the famous Maharaja Bharata, the son of King Dushyanta. Text 21. Amongst great bowmen, this child will be as good as Arjuna. He will be as irresistible as fire and as unsurpassable as the ocean. Purport. In history, there are two Arjunas. One is Kartavirya Arjuna, the king of Haihaya, and the other is the grandfather of the child. Both Arjunas are famous for their bowmanship, and the child Parikshit is foretold to be equal to both of them, particularly in fighting. A short description of the Pandava Arjuna is given below. Pandava Arjuna, the great hero of the Bhagavad Gita. He is the Kshatriya son of Maharaja Pandu. Queen Kunti Devi could call for any one of the demigods, and thus she called Indra, and Arjuna was born by him. Arjuna is therefore a plenary part of the heavenly king Indra. He was born in the month of Falguna, February-March, and therefore he is also called Falguni. When he appeared as the son of Kunti, his future greatness was proclaimed by air messages, and all the important personalities from different parts of the universe, such as the demigods, the Gandharvas, the Adityas from the sun globe, the Rudras, the Vashus, the Nagas, the different rishis, sages of importance, and the Apsaras, the society girls of heaven, all attended the ceremony. The Apsaras pleased everyone by their heavenly dances and songs. Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna and the maternal uncle of Arjuna, sent his priest representative Kasyapa to purify Arjuna by all the prescribed samskaras, or reformatory processes. His samskara of being given a name was performed in the presence of the rishis, residents of Satasringa. He married 4 wives, Draupadi, Subhadra, Chitragada, and Ulupi, from whom he got 4 sons of the names Srutakirti, Abhimanyu, Babravahana, and Iravan, respectively. During his student life, he was entrusted to study under the great professor Dronacharya, along with other Pandavas and the Kurus, but he excelled everyone by his studious intensity, and Dronacharya was especially attracted by his disciplinary affection. Dronacharya accepted him as a first-grade scholar, and loved heartily to bestow upon him all the blessings of military science. He was so ardent a student that he used to practice bowmanship even at night, and for all these reasons Professor Dronacharya was determined to make him the topmost bowman of the world. He passed very brilliantly the examination in piercing the target, and Dronacharya was very pleased. Royal families at Manipura and Tripura are descendants of Arjuna's son, Babravahana. Arjuna saved Dronacharya from the attack of a crocodile, and the Acharya, being pleased with him, rewarded him with a weapon of the name Brahmashiras. Maharaja Drupada was inimical toward Dronacharya, and thus when he attacked the Acharya, Arjuna got him arrested and brought him before Dronacharya. He besieged a city of the name Ahichatra, belonging to Maharaja Drupada, and after taking it over he gave it to Dronacharya. The confidential treatment of the weapon Brahmasiras was explained to Arjuna, and Dronacharya was promised by Arjuna that he would use the weapon if necessary when he, Dronacharya, personally became an enemy of Arjuna. By this the Acharya forecasted the future battle of Kurukshetra, in which Dronacharya was on the opposite side. Maharaja Drupada, although defeated by Arjuna on behalf of his professor Dronacharya, decided to hand over his daughter Draupadi to his young combatant, but he was disappointed when he heard the false news of Arjuna's death in the fire of a shellak house, intrigued by Duryodhana. He therefore arranged for Draupadi's personal selection of a groom who could pierce the eye of a fish hanging on the ceiling. This trick was especially made because only Arjuna could do it, and he was successful in his desire to hand over his equally worthy daughter to Arjuna. Arjuna's brothers were at that time living incognito under agreement with Duryodhana, and Arjuna and his brothers attending the meeting of Draupadi's selection in the dress of Brahmanas. When all the Kshatriya kings assembled saw that a poor Brahmana had been garlanded by Draupadi for her lord, Sri Krishna disclosed his identity to Balarama. He met Alupi at Hardwar, and he was attracted by a girl belonging to Nagaloka, and thus Iravan was born. Similarly, he met Chitragada, a daughter of the king of Manipura, and thus Babravahana was born. Lord Sri Krishna made a plan to help Arjuna to kidnap Subhadra, sister of Sri Krishna, because Baladeva was inclined to hand her over to Duryodhana. Yudhishthira also agreed with Sri Krishna, and thus Subhadra was taken by force by Arjuna and then married to him. Subhadra's son is Abhimanyu, the father of Parikshit Maharaja, the posthumous child. Arjuna satisfied the fire god by setting fire to the Khandava forest, and thus the fire god gave him one weapon. Indra was angry when the fire was set in the Khandava forest, and thus Indra, assisted by all other demigods, began fighting with Arjuna for his great challenge. They were defeated by Arjuna, and Indradeva returned to his heavenly kingdom. Arjuna also promised all protection to one Mayashura, and the letter presented him one valuable conch shell celebrated as the Devadatta. Similarly, he received many other valuable weapons from Indradeva when he was satisfied to see his chivalry. When Maharaja Yudhishthira was disappointed in defeating the king of Magadha, Jarasandha, it was Arjuna only who gave King Yudhishthira all kinds of assurances, and thus Arjuna, Bhima, and Lord Krishna started for Magadha to kill Jarasandha. When he went out to bring all other kings of the world under the subjection of the Pandavas, as was usual after the coronation of every emperor, he conquered the country named Kalinda and brought in subjugation King Bhagadatta. Then he traveled through countries like Antagiri, Ulakapura, and Modapura, and brought under subjugation all the rulers. Sometimes he underwent severe types of penances, and later on he was rewarded by Indradeva. Lord Shiva also wanted to try the strength of Arjuna, and in the form of an aborigine, Lord Shiva met him. There was a great fight between the two, and at last Lord Shiva was satisfied with him and disclosed his identity. Arjuna prayed to the Lord in all humbleness, and the Lord, being pleased with him, presented him the Pashupata weapon. He acquired many other important weapons from different demigods. He received Dandastra from Yamaraja, Pashastra from Varuna, and Antaradanastra from Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly kingdom. Indra wanted him to come to the heavenly kingdom, the Indraloka planet beyond the moon planet. In that planet he was cordially received by the local residents, and he was awarded reception in the heavenly parliament of Indradeva. Then he met Indradeva, who not only presented him with his Vajra weapon, but also taught him the military and musical science as used in the heavenly planet. In one sense, Indra is the real father of Arjuna, and therefore indirectly he wanted to entertain Arjuna with the famous society girl of heaven, Urvashi, the celebrated beauty. The society girls of heaven are lusty, and Urvashi was very eager to contact Arjuna, the strongest human being. She met him in his room and expressed her desires, but Arjuna sustained his unimpeachable character by closing his eyes before Urvasi, addressing her as mother of the Kuru dynasty, and placing her in the category of his mothers Kunti, Madri, and Sachidevi, wife of Indradeva. Disappointed, Urvasi cursed Arjuna and left. In the heavenly planet he also met the great celebrated ascetic Lamasya and prayed to him for the protection of Maharaja Yudhishthira. When his inimical cousin Duryodhana was under the clutches of the Gandharvas, he wanted to save him and requested the Gandharvas to release Duryodhana, but the Gandharvas refused, and thus he fought with them and got Duryodhana released. When all the Pandavas lived incognito, he presented himself in the court of King Virata as a eunuch and was employed as the musical teacher of Uttara, his future daughter-in-law, and was known in the Virata court as the Brihanala. As Brihanala, he fought on behalf of Uttara, the son of King Virata, and thus defeated the Kurus in the fight incognito. His secret weapons were safely kept in the custody of a Somi tree, and he ordered Uttara to get them back. His identity and his brother's identity were later on disclosed to Uttara. Dronacharya was informed of Arjuna's presence in the fight of the Kurus and the Viratas. Later, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna killed many great generals like Karna and others. After the battle of Kurukshetra, he punished Ashvatthama, who had killed all the 5 sons of Draupadi. Then all the brothers went to Bhismadeva. It is due to Arjuna only that the great philosophical discourses of the Bhagavad Gita were again spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. His wonderful acts on the battlefield of Kurukshetra are vividly described in the Mahabharata. Arjuna was defeated, however, by his son Babravahana at Manipura and fell unconscious when Ulupi saved him. After the disappearance of Lord Krishna, the message was brought by Arjuna to Maharaja Yudhishthira. Again Arjuna visited Dwarka, and all the widow wives of Lord Krishna lamented before him. He took them all in the presence of Vasudeva and pacified all of them. Later on, when Vasudeva passed away, he performed his funeral ceremony in the absence of Krishna. While Arjuna was taking all the wives of Krishna to Indraprastha, he was attacked on the way, and he could not protect the ladies in his custody. At last, advised by Vyasadeva, all the brothers headed for Mahaprasthana. On the way, at the request of his brother, he gave up all important weapons as useless, and he dropped them all in the water. Text 22. This child will be as strong as a lion, and as worthy a shelter as the Himalaya mountains. He will be forbearing like the earth, and as tolerant as his parents. Purport. One is compared to the lion when one is very strong and chasing an enemy. One should be a lamb at home and a lion in the chase. The lion never fails in the chase of an animal. Similarly, the head of the state should never fail in chasing an enemy. The Himalaya mountains are famous for all richness. There are innumerable caves to live in, numberless trees of good fruits to eat, good springs to drink water from, and profuse drugs and minerals to cure diseases. Any man who is not materially prosperous can take shelter of these great mountains, and he will be provided with everything required. Both the materialist and the spiritualist can take advantage of the great shelter of the Himalayas. On the surface of the earth there are so many disturbances caused by the inhabitants. In the modern age the people have begun to detonate atomic weapons on the surface of the earth, and still the earth is forbearing to the inhabitants, like a mother who excuses a little child. Parents are always tolerant to children for all sorts of mischievous acts. An ideal king may be possessed of all these good qualities, and the child Parikshit is foretold to have all these qualities in perfection. Text 23. This child will be like his grandfather Yudhishthira, or Brahma, in equanimity of mind. He will be munificent like the lord of the Kailasa hill, Shiva, and he will be the resort of everyone, like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, who is even the shelter of the goddess of fortune. Purport. Mental equanimity refers both to Maharaja Yudhishthira and to Brahma, the grandfather of all living beings. According to Sridhara Swami, the grandfather referred to as Brahma, but according to Vishwanatha Chakravarti, the grandfather is Maharaja Yudhishthira himself. But in both cases the comparison is equally good because both of them are recognized representatives of the Supreme Lord, and thus both of them have to maintain mental equanimity, being engaged in welfare work for the living being. Any responsible executive agent at the top of administration has to tolerate different types of onslaughts from the very persons for whom he works. Brahmaji was criticized even by the gopis, the highest perfectional devotees of the Lord. The gopis were dissatisfied with the work of Brahmaji because Lord Brahma, as creator of this particular universe, created eyelids which obstructed their seeing Lord Krishna. They could not tolerate a moment's blinking of the eyes, for it kept them from seeing their beloved Lord Krishna. So what to speak of others who are naturally very critical of every action of a responsible man? Similarly, Maharaja Yudhishthira had to cross over many difficult situations created by his enemies, and he proved to be the most perfect maintainer of mental equanimity in all critical circumstances. Therefore, the example of both grandfathers for maintaining equanimity of mind is quite fitting. Lord Shiva is a celebrated demigod who awards gifts to beggars. His name is therefore Ashutosa, or one who is pleased very easily. He is also called the Bhutanatha, or the Lord of the common folk, who are mainly attached to him because of his munificent gifts, even without consideration of the after effects. Ravana was very attached to Lord Shiva, and by easily pleasing him, Ravana became so powerful that he wanted to challenge the authority of Lord Rama. Of course, Ravana was never helped by Lord Shiva when he fought with Rama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Lord of Lord Shiva. To Vrakashura, Lord Shiva awarded a benediction which was not only awkward, but also disturbing. Vrakashura became empowered by the grace of Lord Shiva to vanish anyone's head simply by touching it. Although this was awarded by Lord Shiva, the cunning fellow wanted to make an experiment of the power by touching the head of Lord Shiva. Thus the Lord had to take shelter of Vishnu to save himself from trouble, and the Lord Vishnu, by his illusory potency, asked Vrakashura to make an experiment with his own head. The fellow did it and was finished himself, and so the world was saved from all sorts of trouble by such a cunning beggar of the demigods. The excellent point is that Lord Shiva never denies anyone any sort of gift. He is therefore the most generous, although sometimes some kind of a mistake is made. Rama means the goddess of fortune, and her shelter is Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is the maintainer of all living beings. There are innumerable living beings, not only on the surface of this planet, but also in all other hundreds of thousands of planets. All of them are provided with all necessities of life for the progressive march towards the end of self-realization, but on the path of sense gratification they are put into difficulty by the agency of Maya, the illusory energy, and so travel the path of a false plan of economic development. Such economic development is never successful because it is illusory. These men are always after the mercy of the illusory goddess of fortune, but they do not know that the goddess of fortune can live only under the protection of Vishnu. Without Vishnu, the goddess of fortune is an illusion. We should therefore seek the protection of Vishnu instead of directly seeking the protection of the goddess of fortune. Only Vishnu and the devotees of Vishnu can give protection to all, and because Maharaja Parikshit was himself protected by Vishnu, it was quite possible for him to give complete protection to all who wanted to live under his rule. Text 24. This child will be also as good as Lord Sri Krishna by following in his footsteps. In magnanimity he will become as great as King Rantideva, and in religion he will be like Maharaja Yayati. Purport. The last instruction of Lord Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is that one should give up everything and should follow in the footsteps of the Lord alone. Less intelligent persons do not agree to this great instruction of the Lord, as ill luck would have it, but one who is actually intelligent catches up this sublime instruction and is immensely benefited. Foolish people do not know that association is the cause of acquiring qualities. Association with fire makes an object hot, even in the material sense. Therefore, association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead makes one qualified like the Lord. As we have discussed previously, one can achieve 78% of the godly qualities of the Lord's intimate association. To follow the instructions of the Lord is to associate with the Lord. The Lord is not a material object whose presence one has to feel for such association. The Lord is present everywhere and at all times. It is quite possible to have his association simply by following his instruction, because the Lord and his instruction, and the Lord in his name, fame, attributes, and paraphernalia are all identical with him, being absolute knowledge. Maharaja Parikshit associated with the Lord even from the womb of his mother up to the last day of his valuable life, and thus he acquired all the essential good qualities of the Lord in all perfection. Rantideva, an ancient king prior to the Mahabharata period, referred to by Narada Muni while instructing Sanjaya, as mentioned in Mahabharata, Dronaparva 67. He was a great king, liberal for hospitality and distribution of foodstuff. Even Lord Sri Krishna praised his acts of charity and hospitality. He was blessed by the great Vashishta Muni for supplying him cold water, and thus he achieved the heavenly planet. He used to supply fruits, roots, and leaves to the rishis, and thus he was blessed by them with fulfillment of his desires. Although a Kshatriya by birth, he never ate flesh in his life. He was especially hospitable to Vashishta Muni, and by his blessings only he attained the higher planetary residence. He is one of those pious kings whose names are remembered in the morning and evening. Yayati, the great emperor of the world and the original forefather of all great nations of the world who belong to the Aryan and Indo-European stock. He is the son of Maharaja Nahusha, and he became the emperor of the world due to his elder brothers becoming a great and liberated saintly mystic. He ruled over the world for several thousands of years and performed many sacrifices and pious activities recorded in history. Although his early youth was very lustful and full of romantic stories, he fell in love with Devayani, the most beloved daughter of Sukracharya. Devayani wished to marry him, but at first he refused to accept her because of her being a daughter of a Brahmana. According to Shastras, a Brahmana could marry the daughter of a Brahmana. They were very much cautious about Varnashankara population in the world. Sukracharya amended this law of forbidden marriage and induced Emperor Yayati to accept Devayani. Devayani had a girlfriend named Sarmista who also fell in love with the emperor and thus went with her friend Devayani. Sukracharya forbade Emperor Yayati to call Sarmista into his bedroom, but Yayati could not strictly follow his instruction. He secretly married Sarmista also and begot sons by her. When this was known by Devayani, she went to her father and lodged a complaint. Yayati was much attached to Devayani, and when he went to his father-in-law's place to call her, Sukracharya was angry with him and cursed him to become impotent. Yayati begged his father-in-law to withdraw his curse, but the sage asked Yayati to ask youthfulness from his sons and let them become old as the condition of his becoming potent. He had 5 sons, 2 from Devayani and 3 from Sarmista. From his 5 sons, namely 1. Yadu, 2. Turvasu, 3. Druhyu, 4. Anu, and 5. Puru, 5 famous dynasties, namely 1. The Yadu dynasty, 2. The Yavana Turk dynasty, 3. The Bhoja dynasty, 4. The Mlecha dynasty, Greek, and 5. The Parava dynasty, all emanated to spread all over the world. He reached the heavenly planets by dint of his pious acts, but he fell down from there because of his self-advertisement and criticizing other great souls. After his fall, his daughter and grandson bestowed upon him their accumulated virtues, and by the help of his grandson and friend Sibi, he was again promoted to the heavenly kingdom, becoming one of the assembly members of Yamaraja, with whom he is staying as a devotee. He performed more than 1,000 different sacrifices, gave in charity very liberally, and was a very influential king. His majestic power was felt all over the world. His youngest son agreed to award him his youthfulness when he was troubled with lustful desires, even for 1,000 years. Finally, he became detached from worldly life and returned the youthfulness again to his son Puru. He wanted to hand over the kingdom to Puru, but his noblemen and the subjects did not agree. But when he explained to his subjects the greatness of Puru, they agreed to accept Puru as the king. And thus Emperor Yayati retired from family life and left home for the forest. Text 25. This child will be like Bali Maharaja in patience, a staunch devotee of Lord Krishna, like Prahlada Maharaja, a performer of many Ashvamedha horse sacrifices, and a follower of the old and experienced men. Purport. Bali Maharaja, one of the 12 authorities in the devotional service of the Lord. Bali Maharaja is a great authority in devotional service because he sacrificed everything to please the Lord and relinquished the connection of his so-called spiritual master who obstructed him on the path of risking everything for the service of the Lord. The highest perfection of religious life is to attain to the stage of unqualified devotional service of the Lord without any cause or without being obstructed by any kind of worldly obligation. Bali Maharaja was determined to give up everything for the satisfaction of the Lord, and he did not care for any obstruction whatsoever. He is the grandson of Prahlada Maharaja, another authority in the devotional service of the Lord. Bali Maharaja and the history of his dealings with Vishnu Vamanadeva are described in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 11 through 24. Prahlada Maharaja, a perfect devotee of Lord Krishna, Vishnu, his father, Hiranyaksipu, chastised him severely when he was only 5 years old for his becoming an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. He was the first son of Hiranyaksipu, and his mother's name was Kayadu. Prahlada Maharaja was an authority in the devotional service of the Lord because he had his father killed by Lord Narasimhadeva, setting the example that even a father should be removed from the path of devotional service if such a father happens to be an obstacle. He had 4 sons, and the eldest son, Virachana, is the father of Bali Maharaja, mentioned above. The history of Prahlada Maharaja's activities is described in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 26. This child will be the father of kings who will be like sages. For world peace and for the sake of religion, he will be the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrelsome. Purport. The wisest man in the world is a devotee of the Lord. The sages are called wise men, and there are different types of wise men for different branches of knowledge. Unless therefore the king of the head of the state is the wisest man, he cannot control all types of wise men in the state. In the line of royal succession in the family of Maharaja Yudhishthira, all the kings without exception were the wisest men of their times, and so also it is foretold about Maharaja Parikshit and his son Maharaja Janamejaya, who was yet to be born. Such wise kings can become chastisers of upstarts and uprooters of Kali, or quarrelsome elements. As will be clear in the chapters ahead, Maharaja Parikshit wanted to kill the personified Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow, the emblem of peace and religion. The symptoms of Kali are 1. Wine, 2. Women, 3. Gambling, and 4. Slaughterhouses. Wise rulers of all states should take lessons from Maharaja Parikshit in how to maintain peace and morality by subduing the upstarts and quarrelsome people who indulge in wine, illicit connection with women, gambling, and meat-eating supplied by regularly maintained slaughterhouses. In this age of Kali, regular license is issued for maintaining all of these different departments of quarrel. So how can they expect peace and morality in the state? The state fathers, therefore, must follow the principles of becoming wiser by devotion to the Lord, by chastising the breaker of discipline, and by uprooting the symptoms of quarrel, as mentioned above. If we want blazing fire, we must use dry fuel. Blazing fire and moist fuel go ill together. Peace and morality can prosper only by the principles of Maharaja Parikshit and his followers. Text 27. After hearing about his death, which will be caused by the bite of a snake bird sent by a son of a Brahmana, he will get himself freed from all material attachment and surrender unto the personality of Godhead, taking shelter of him. Purport. Material attachment and taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord go ill together. Material attachment means ignorance of transcendental happiness under the shelter of the Lord. Devotional service to the Lord while existing in the material world is a way to practice one's transcendental relation with the Lord, and when it is matured, one gets completely free from all material attachment and becomes competent to go back home, back to Godhead. Maharaja Parikshit, being especially attached to the Lord from the beginning of his body in the womb of his mother, was continuously under the shelter of the Lord, and the so-called warning of his death within 7 days from the date of the curse by the Brahmana's son was a boon to him to enable him to prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead.